We started these conversations over a year ago, and we started them because I really just wanted to understand what was going on. The world was getting crazier and more dangerous, wars popping up all over the place. But the more we talk about these wars, I feel like I'm getting dragged into it as well, at least on the information war. And I don't know if this is the right thing I should be doing. Should I be participating in this war? Or am I choosing to be political? Or, I get angry when I hear about what happens, especially when I see what's going on in Gaza. I see what the Zionists, the control in our government, and I see these videos of people in Ukraine getting blown up. But I don't want to stoke hate. I don't want to hurt anybody. How do we tread this line? Should we think of ourselves in a war that we are in an information war and I need to just gear up because people will come after me because I'm just trying to have a discussion with my dad and figure out what's going on? And then if you're saying that it's a war, then we're saying, okay, well, there's no mercy, right? I have to go after the other side. Do I choose? You know what you kind of know what I'm saying? Netanyahu says that they're fighting 8 fronts now, right? The 8th front of the information war.
Right.
Like, am I in this battle?
Well, in a way you are. Again, I think you have to say that we should always be truthful. None of us are perfect. We all have our biases. No human being is completely objective, but we can work at being objective. We can work at being truthful. And and if we are trying to cleave as close to the truth as possible, then we're doing good work. I think that's I think that should be self-evident. We want the truth to win. And I think, in this case, like in these two wars, by and large, especially in the case of Gaza, that our government has put itself on the wrong side. And so, we are firmly opposed to what they're doing. And we oppose them by shining a light on what's really going on.
Right. I guess an argument that some people would make, or maybe a position a lot of people that are wanting to stay out of this conversation, is that we are upsetting the status quo, and then that can breed chaos, right? Do you want to descend into a state of nature where it's pure chaos, or is it better to say, yeah, things are horrible, bad, but the alternative is even worse? I think that's the argument that a lot of people might make or rationalize, Is there any truth to that? Obviously, I'm not going to stop. We're not going to stop talking about this.
Right.
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here a little bit here, because I also see some dangers of the information war because I get emotional, I get invested in these stories, and it can escalate.
Oh, yeah. As far as it getting emotional, whatever, it's, we need to be as cool as. Let's say be as calm and rational as possible. Yeah, emotion can be the enemy of rational analysis, and it can be the enemy of truth. But if we don't feel any emotion, there's something wrong too, especially in the case because many people are dying. This is not just an academic question. It is, a very we're talking about the fates of millions of people, and if possibly, there's always the specter of a third world war. So to say that we have to have emotion, I guess we just have to constantly stop. We can't do it all the time, but at least periodically you have to stop and reflect and make sure that that your emotions haven't actually warped your analysis and made you blind to some truths, because this is going to happen. You can certainly, we certainly see it on the other side. It could happen on our side too. There's that. And then the whole status quo argument. Yes, the status quo always has this advantage, just like people prefer the devil they know to the devil they don't. It just, if you talk about a real, and if things are still okay and you're getting by and you're relatively comfortable, you don't want to rock the boat. I mean, that's people's natural instinct, and they just kind of, when they see somebody rocking the boat, many people just have a kind of a visceral reaction to that. I would just say that we understand that the status quo is actually become profoundly destabilizing. It is taking us to the verge of World War III. It is supporting a genocide. And these are things that just, we could just choose to ignore them, but they're going to have consequences. And, they are having consequences now, first of all, huge consequences. It's not just a potential, but I think, again, it will have consequences for our own system. and they won't be pleasant. And it's actually better to address these things sooner rather than later. The longer you put them off, I think the greater the crash is going to be. I think there's going to be some kind of crash. But if you have, at least if you simply, let's say, like in the case of Gaza or whatever, and you just let the Zionists have their way, and anybody who criticizes is tagged a radical, evil anti-Semite, and so on and so forth. In the end, they can't actually hide the truth, and when it comes out, it's going to be all the more, let's say, revolutionary, radical, extreme in one form or another. It's actually better, to start earlier, to begin when you can still talk, at least potentially, and debate, rather than wait for the bullets to fly. And then let's say the truth is the truth, and you need to get it out there the best you can. If the system's going to fall apart, we want to have some sort of understanding out there, like, okay, where did we go wrong, so that we can rebuild. If there's just no understanding, we're going to enter into a period of dark ages. I don't know if that's a very comforting answer, but
Yeah,
I guess that's the way I look at it. I think, we just have a duty to say the truth as we see it, and we have a duty to reflect, to know that we are capable of error, and we can be blinded by our emotions, but we have a duty to do it. In the end, it's good. It's needed. It's needed in these times.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's incredible to think that we're living right now in a society where the other side, let's say the Zionists, the globalists, they're trying to ostracize people from polite society for objecting to what looks a lot like a genocide to most of us. And that's just so crazy. You're talking about the devil we know is better than the devil we don't, but the devil we know has really shown its colors. It's like, how did we get to this point where they're trying to gaslight us on why it's good that we're blowing up kids in Gaza? This is good for Western civilization. This is nuts. This is nuts.
Well, you think, like, if their people had been brave back in the late 1960s, again, when the USS Liberty incident occurred. If our president had been brave, he knew what happened. He was angry. He was initially going to expose them, but he was frightened, by people who said, we're going to smear you as an anti-Semite if you go down this road. Again, major donors, we kind of see the beginning of the Israel lobby back then. It was real. But if he had been brave and others had been brave, that, we would not be where we are now. It's because of cowardice, of people who are afraid to rock the boat, to say the truth, to unleash some, real serious social conflict. That now it's much, 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 much worse. It should have been, it was the cowardice back then that brought us to where we are now. And it's only going to get worse. We are, it's a late hour now, but I think we need to shout as loud as we can about this.
Yeah, I guess what's depressing for me is just the level of immorality amongst our politicians, amongst so many people. I thought this was reserved for the serial killer psychopaths that they make a Netflix documentary about, but it seems so prevalent. I didn't know that there would be so many people that I guess they all get brought to the top. I guess it's money and power that's just corrupted so many people, but that's not I'd like to think that's not the natural state of things. Or, we were talking about in the beginning about these civilians that are being hit by these drones in Ukraine. It's like, I just didn't think that there'd be so many people that are just okay with that could go to bed at night, that can, it scares me to think that there's so much evil in the world. I didn't see it. Maybe it's always been there and it's been suppressed and now it's bubbled to the top, or it's just we're in this weird phase. I mean, I've heard about it historically, like when the Japanese and the rape of Nanjing, how they just said they were just basically kind of people. I heard people recounting that they were just like, seeing red and they were almost possessed, like, and it was like a fever dream almost, like when these things were going on. And I don't know if that's scary. That needs to we need to bottle that up. We need to tamp that down. I don't want that to spread.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. Do you think that the world's always been this much immorality in the world?
We're a fallen race, the human race, and always had always capable of evil. It's always been, and that's the importance of civilization. It's just establishing norms and keeping us on the straight and narrow. Because our left to our natural tendencies, I don't know that we eventually quickly go to murder or anything, but we are vulnerable to it, and always have been. Yeah. Right. Well, what can I say? And okay.
Well, let me ask you a little something. Like, we're saying what we believe to be true. We're having these discussions and just being very honest and authentic about our feelings with them. The other side, though, they will say that, we're dangerous or whatever. What is the danger that they're presenting? Like, and is there any validity to it? I mean, I understand the anti-Semitism charge kind of thing. The one thing I would just say is like, I don't want people just to label all Jews as bad. Like this is something that we got to be careful about. I understand that fear. If I was but if you're a Jewish person, you want to be speaking out against like Max Blumenthal. I understand, but
yeah.
Anyways, do you think there's a danger that is? What are they presenting? What are they saying? Like, is there any validity to just what they're saying? That speaking the truth is like.
Yeah, well, I think the reason that I am where I am is that I think that they have essentially embraced falsehood. It is a lie about what's happening in Ukraine, a lie about what's happening in Palestine. And they, I'm not God. I can't see into their souls. I don't know, what caused them to embrace this lie. It could be that they are fundamentally good people, that they have simply been deceived. And I'm sure that's the truth, especially just when you're talking about average people within the country that maybe fly an Israeli flag or whatever. They just have believed it. And if they actually saw with their own eyes, they would be horrified because they are decent people. So I don't want to judge them. But other people, I think to varying degrees, yeah, they've embraced this lie, and but they know it's a lie to some extent. It's just that they have chosen, the side of genocide. They have chosen to ally themselves with the Banderites, and it's hard to know. Again, it's just like in each individual case, where a person is. But again, it's just I have come to take this position, just based on my understanding, looking at all the evidence. And I am proud to be part of this, let's say dissident geopolitical community. It's not like we're incapable of error. From time to time, I think we sometimes hop on some bandwagon that's maybe not actually entirely true. We make mistakes. But I think by and large, we're on the side of the truth. That this is, we are a fact-based, by and large, a fact-based community, and the other side has, they've entered this this delusion. Now it's something you can actually see it happen to them, like in the case of Ukraine, but going back, especially even after the coup, all the way up until 2022, there was an awareness of this problem of ultranationalism and banderism within Ukraine, and it did come out. And now, you can see people go through the stage of, they have some kind of awareness that this is a problem. And then they seem to make a decision. I don't know if it's a conscious decision or it's just emotion, but then they let it go. They become blind to it when the problem is actually becoming much worse. They have put themselves on the wrong side. They have for emotional reasons, they have made an emotional investment in a side that is committing, that is actually you know, you is Banderite, is quasi-Nazi or something, um, and so they made huge compromises with the truth. It's the only way they can hold their worldview together.
Well, if you say these wars, if Israel and Ukraine, they're built on falsehoods, then I'd like to think that the truth always wins. If we're is that true, or is that a naive little view of the world? That can't. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're building something on a falsehood, it just has to crumble. You can have short victories, but it can never
I
last, right?
Yeah, I think in the long run, that any civilization that is going to last and last for centuries has to be based, by and large, it's on the truth. Um, has to have, let's say, at least a correct understanding of human nature. Otherwise it can't survive from generation to generation. And I believe in just very recent generations that our leadership, the Western hegemonic world has actually, has gone down a road that's not sustainable. It these lies, and we can see it like in these really self-destructive acts, particularly in Europe, it seems to be most advanced. They are doing themselves in. It's not like, in the end, it's going to be that they are doing themselves in because they have, again, just have bought into a lie and have decided to build their so-called civilization on falsehoods.
I mean, then if it's being built on falsehoods, then we could say that really Israel was doomed from the start. Then, if it was built on a falsehood, right? The only way that maybe potentially it could have succeeded is if they recognized the sins of the Nakba and said this was wrong. We need to give equal rights to Christians, to Muslims, and to Jews. That this is a land for everybody where we're treated equally. It's not an ethno-supremacist state. That's maybe the only way that they could have done if you recognize the sins of the past.
Yeah.
If you refuse to, then it's just you're doomed, right?
Yeah, well, I'd like to think that. I think that with the delusion, I'd like to say that an ethno-supremacist state can't survive, but I think it can actually. But I think Israel is doomed, not so much just that it's ethno-supremacist, but that increasingly it has come to believe that it's, that their ethno-supremacism is truly divine and is, therefore they can throw caution to the winds. That's what we're seeing, is that they used to be careful about the kind of face that they presented to the world. They proceeded more cautiously. They were, ethnic cleansing was conducted, over all those decades, even when it was these very secular powers were in charge. They let it happen. They were complicit in it, but they were cautious, and they knew that they couldn't go too fast, that they always had to spin things in a certain way. Now they don't. They take selfies and they celebrate it. And I think that's part of this sense that, let's say it's a sense that's born, in fact, of experience of all those decades of unconditional support from the U.S., but then also this increasing kind of messianism, the religious fanatics that are having growing influence within Israel. It's not just that, okay, we don't really need to be careful anymore because it's clear that God is on our side and we can just go full steam ahead. And I think that's going to bring them down because they can't, in the end, they have gotten away, but we see how the ground is shifting in the U.S. and anger is growing around the world. They're going to take it too far. And
yeah, we'll see. I mean, I know I shouldn't hope for this, but I almost want them to take it too far, like try to strike Iran. But I think there is some realism that they have some limits. They're not completely, protected by their divine shield that they believe they have.
Yeah,
right?
well, I think you're right. I think Netanyahu, in a way, is sort of straddles the two. He's secular. He is not a religious Jew, but he's come to see them as an important part of his coalition. He's clearly devoted to Greater Israel, and so he's in line with them. But he has I think a still has a pretty good grip on reality. I mean, he's gone far, but it may be at some point where the dam breaks and somebody like Ben Gvir actually becomes prime minister of Israel, and then it just, then we'll see the third temple and all that. That's that could actually just bring about the end of Israel.